Hi, my name is Fiona di Pinto and I'm a watercolour artist based in Rome, Italy. I am one of Etchr Studio's resident artists and I have several classes up on Etchr Studio's website already. My true passion is watercolour portraiture painted in an expressive manner. I love to incorporate blooms and splatters in my work. I like to have fun with it. But I also like to capture the human emotion. That's why I call them expressive watercolour portraits. Thank you very much for joining me, and I really hope to see you in one of my classes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Etchr mini workshop preview. Today, we are here with Fiona di Pinto, who's going to be showing us how to do some textures with watercolor for elements in your portraits. So if you have questions for Fiona, who, by the way, is one of our resident artists, which means that she comes back regularly to teach classes with us. And she also has many classes up on our website already. So today she's going to be showing us those textures. And if you have questions for her, please put them in the chat in all capital letters where I can see them better. And if those questions are relevant, I will ask at that time. I might hold off some of the questions until the end. We do our question and answer. And also, Fiona is part of our Facebook group, which is a group for people who can post their work. You can ask for some feedback from your peers and also Fiona, or you can just share your work for the sake of sharing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Fiona, who will tell us more about herself and what we're going to do today. Fiona, it's all you.
So hi, everyone, and welcome to this free live demo. And as Kitty said, today we will be talking about how to paint textures in watercolor and specifically ribbon. And this is going to be useful for you in many occasions when painting, because we can use this technique for a variety of things. So not only painting a texture or cloth or fabric. And the idea for this live demo came to me when I was thinking about a new cycle, which is going to be my next cycle of classes with Etchr Studio. And this is going to be something completely new, which I hope gets a lot of you excited. And it's going to be a cycle about inspirational women, women who paved the way for the women of the future, the women we are now in this day and age, women who were brave and who were ahead of their times, who thought outside the box and just showed immense bravery and artistic flair and passion and love for life in spite of the suffering some of them went through. So our masterclass is going to be a painting of Frida Kahlo. I am assuming you all know who she is. She was a Mexican artist who was a woman who was way ahead of her times, and she was simply amazing in so many ways. And she will be she was what inspired me to paint fabric and specifically a headscarf or ribbon, which features in her portrait. But we will also be having a 90-minute mini workshop, which will be coming to you on the 15th of May. And we will also have, wait for this, a portrait of an inspirational woman on May 15th in our 90-minute class. And this is going to be the painting of another amazing woman who I suppose you've all heard about. She was called Amelia Earhart, and she was the first female pilot to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And she did lots of other incredible and amazing things. And this is the portrait that we will be painting of Amelia Earhart. We will also be having some elements of fabric in here. We don't have them specifically in this portrait, but she will be wearing a scarf. So Amelia Earhart was such an amazing woman as well, who disappeared mysteriously in the skies. And, you know, there's a huge mystery about her disappearance, and poets and singers have written songs about her. Movies have been made about her. And this is going to be a way to connect with these amazing women and to pay a tribute to them. It could become a collection if there's a demand for it. It could become a series where we will go and check out all these amazing inspirational women. And I've done many portraits of these, which were quite successful. And you can find them all on my Instagram handle, Drawings in a Drawer, all in one word. And, you know, have a look at that. if you're interested. But now I'll, pass it over to Kitty and we can start with our video.
Okay, and just so you know, we have some comments in the chat already saying amazing, really excited, fantastic project, I'm in, and wow, it looks good. Wow, that is
fantastic.
beautiful. So, yay, awesome. Lots of interest already.
I'm really excited about this project, really excited. I'm passionate about it, and I hope you will become passionate about it too.
All right, so here we go.
Okay, so this is the bow that we will be painting. And before starting the painting, I'm going to show you some of my work. I'm not sure if you know my style, but this is my style. And most of these paintings are classes I did for Etchr Studio. You can find the recordings on Etchr Studio's website. So they're usually 3-hour long, step-by-step tutorials. This was my recent one with deeper, richer skin tones. You are guided step-by-step through this, even the cluster of flowers. This was another master class. And as always, you can find it on Etchr Studio's YouTube channel, not YouTube channel, website if you want to find it. And this one was also a class, a master class. And this one was one of my most recent master classes as well, which are with additional elements. This is what it was called. And here we have the painting of Frida Kahlo. If you could pause this, Kitty, yes, kindly. And basically, I'm showing you the ribbon that inspired, gave me the idea to have this little live demo today. So painting texture, which can come in handy when you'll be painting this ribbon on Frida Kahlo's head. And this will be our masterclass, which will be coming after our 90-minute mini workshop of Amelia Earhart on May 15th. So sign up for both of these guys, because these are going to be truly exciting, and we're going to connect with these amazing ladies through painting their portraits and adding symbolisms about their lives in there. We can move on.
Okay, here we go. That is so beautiful.
Yes, so we have the earring with the babies in them, because
I love the detail.
She had a long life desire to have children, but unfortunately due to an accident in a streetcar that she suffered at age 18, she was unable to have it. So this is a reference photo that we will be using today. As you can see, it's a bow, but it's also a little bit like a headpiece. It goes over the head. And we're starting with some clear water as usual. And I'm just filling in, the sketch with clear water. And that is because I want the surface of the paper to be wet when I go in with my paint. And I'm just using a flat brush by Borciani Bonazzi here. It's a synthetic brush. And I find it quite useful to use flat brushes in certain situations. This is an example. As you can see, I'm just going in and filling in the sketch and try to make sure not to go outside the edges of the sketch, because if you do, now you can see that is wet. By tilting the paper, I can see how wet it is. And basically, if you go beyond the edge, then the paint will bleed beyond the edge, and that will not be a nice look. So now what I'm doing is I'm mixing some Madder Lake Red Light in my ceramic palette, and it's quite a watery wash. You can see me doing this here. And then I'm just going to drop it into the sketch. I'm being very careful, and see how it bleeds out organically. So that is the technique I'm going for here. I'm actually going to use to my advantage what is one of the main traits of watercolor, that it spreads organically, beautifully, and it kind of does tend to replicate the way fabric or other textures behave. And I'm going to use that to my advantage. So be very careful when I work close to the edges of the sketch. I'm using the side of the brush as opposed to, you just going in very randomly. I'm using the edge of it over here. You can see how careful I am around the edges. And I'm not just covering the whole area of the bow. I am checking back and forwards with my reference image to see where the shadows are, where the lighter areas are, where the darker areas are. Because as with everything, even when I talk about portraits in my class, I always tell you how important it is to have at least 3 values or tones in your work, in your paintings. Because any less than 3 values, I mean a dark one, a middle tone, and a highlight, will make your painting look flat and non-realistic, and that applies to painting fabric and ribbons as well. So you have to keep that in mind at all times. So again, I just keep checking back and forwards with my reference image using my flat brush. I've never changed the brush. I have never changed the color of paint, the shade of paint I'm using, but I'm now kind of very gently sweeping that paint, pulling that paint out into certain areas that are not going to be as dark as the surrounding areas. So we can see that we kind of have a lighter area in the center and darker around the borders. So I'm here picking up more paint and I am placing it where I believe it should be darker. So that is closer to the center of the bow, where naturally we would have a shadow because it's curving inwards. And I'm using the side of my brush to, you know, have some control, have some precision around those edges. I am still working wet and wet, though the paint is less diluted at this stage. And I'm pulling it out towards the more central areas, but making sure that I don't go over the areas that are left lighter. And I keep using the brush in the same way. This brush offers a lot of control, like all synthetic brushes. They hold less water. Always remember, less water, more control, more water, less control. So if you're a beginner, starting with a synthetic brush is definitely a good idea, and using not too much water, or, you know, kind of playing it by ear, see what works and what not, is definitely a good idea. Don't go in with a natural bristles brush with loads of water, because it will seem impossible for you to control what you're doing. So I'm now going into that headband, and I have got the same color on my brush, but a little less, a little more diluted. So I have less water, more paint. And I'm using the neat edge of that brush to create the edges of the band, which curls back at the top to give the idea that it's curving back across the top of the head. And naturally, I'm imagining a fabric like satin or something like that, something more shiny than, I think the bow from the reference image is velvet. So I would imagine something like a silk ribbon to have a bit of a shine, like in the center area on that headband. Now I'm going in with a brush that's more wet, and I'm kind of reactivating the paint in those areas with my brush. And I'm just kind of spreading the paint out a little bit. As you can see, as always, our watercolor has dried lighter. Always take that into consideration. Watercolor will dry lighter, always. And I'm now pulling that paint more towards the central areas, which I kept lighter, and they will remain lighter. As you can see, I'm not going over those completely. The only time I would do that is if I clean my brush completely in my clear water and then kind of drag it out. You can see me using the kitchen paper now. So the kitchen paper acts as the eraser of watercolor. The way you do that is you pick it up, you dab it down hard and with a very decisive gesture, and then you lift it. So it's a lifting technique. Don't go in and try and use like a wiping motion, because that will spread your paint all over the place and it won't work. I'm now going into that ribbon that's falling down across the side of the neck, let's say, and I'm just using a slightly tinted water. This was kind of, let's say, an accident or so. You can use clear water or slightly tinted water. It doesn't really matter, because we're not going to have any areas in this painting where the white of the page is going to show through completely. So I wet that area because I want to use the same technique that I used for the main bow. Now I'm going in to the headband, and I've just wet my brush, so that water's clean, the brush is clean, and I'm kind of reactivating the painting in the two areas which I had already put down, and I am kind of spreading it across the shine so that it's not completely white, because that would not look very realistic.
Fiona?
Yes?
How much water is on your brush when you clean it and re-wet it to spread that paint?
I would say the brush wouldn't be dripping wet, it would be damp. You can check this by patting the brush on the back of your hand and seeing how much water it leaves behind. If it's like too much, I would go in and dab it gently on your kitchen paper. If it's just leaving, you know, a feeling of dampness on the back of your hand, I would say that is a good level of dampness.
Great, thank you.
So I'm showing you close up here how I go in into the edge of that bowl and just tapping my brush down, I allow the paint to spread organically into the texture of the bowl. You can see what it does. Some people call that kind of snowflake effect because it does tend to look like a snowflake. And this is also a technique that you could use for something like flower petals, for example, or rose petals, or even different fabrics. Like, for example, if you're thinking about painting like velvet corduroy jackets, let's say, you can use this technique and then just go over with a very kind of saturated mix of paint and paint in the lines, for example. Like you see me doing here at the bottom right corner of the bowl, I kind of created a sharp edge to give it a bit more definition. And again, I've gone in with a more saturated mix of the paint here to kind of create an edge on that part of the ribbon that is flowing down along the side of the head and the neck, let's say. So you see me here cleaning my brush with a circular motion. Don't just dab your brush in the water, clean it, then check on your kitchen paper how much paint is actually on your brush. And I didn't have much there at all. It was almost clear. And then you can use that damp brush to kind of ease the paint down that ribbon, because we will have a shadow at the top of it, where obviously there's a shadow cast onto the ribbon by the bowl. And then you can kind of pull it down. We would probably have shadows along the edges and along the bottom angle of that ribbon. So I'm picking up more paint here. And as you can see, I'm bringing it down into the bottom of that ribbon. And that is helping me. The shape of the brush is actually helping me because it's actually the same, almost the same shape as what I'm trying to paint. So always try to use the shape of brushes to your advantage. Also, sometimes using flat brushes can help us to step out of our comfort zone, because it helps us, you know, be more kind of to think outside the box more, let's say. I've seen amazing portraits and paintings done entirely with flat brushes, which is something I've never tried yet, but I definitely want to try to challenge myself. So I'm going in and outlining the ribbon that is falling down the side of the neck, and then going in and defining that kind of shine area as well, making sure I don't have too much paint on my brush. And you can check how much paint you have on your brush, or if the color's right, by always keeping a scrap of watercolor paper handy while you're painting and swatching your paint on there to make sure you have the right shade or the right amount of paint or water to paint ratio. So I'm now using a clean damp brush to kind of drag out, reactivate that paint at the bottom and drag out that color into the center of the part of the ribbon that's flowing down. And you can really see how in the bowl, the organic way that watercolor flows into the center really creates a natural effect. And before painting this bowl, I had actually painted another bowl, and I realized I didn't like it at all, because it was literally too stiff. Even though I had copied this like reference image I'd found, it kind of looked like two triangular shapes. And I realized that when we're painting fabric, we have to remain extremely soft. If we have a sharp edge in there somewhere, like we do have a little bit at the right side, at the bottom right side of this bowl, then we will only want to keep it, very, very limited, only in certain areas. Because if you start painting sharp edges all over, for example, you create sharp edges in both, let's call it the wings of this bow, it's going to end up like you've painted a bow made of plastic. It's almost, you've got to think like you're painting a flower. And I kind of envisaged myself painting a bow that was floppy, kind of replicating what natural silk or a kind of heavier material bow would look like. So if you're going to create something that looks rigid or stiff, it's going to look unnatural. So I would really strongly advise you to always concentrate on keeping the painting loose and not creating harsh edges till you get to the very end, and we go in and add the folds that we can naturally find in fabrics and textures. And that is the only area where I would have a more sharp defined look. So I've now gone in and I'm using a mixture that I love to use, which is English red plus violet. And that really helps me create a kind of darker shadow tone, which I like to use not only in this instance, but also when painting portraits and painting areas like the creases of the lips, the tear ducts, and the inside of the nostrils. And I've switched to my number 6 silver black velvet brush at this point, and it's smaller, so it offers me more precision. And I'm going into the areas that I want to darken up, and I'm just dropping that mixture, English red plus I think it's quinacridone violet, or any purple that you have handy actually. And I'm darkening up those areas that I want to darken up. And you can see we're kind of getting the values in there. We have midtones, we have darker areas, and we have highlights as well. Though, as I said in the beginning, no part of this painting has the white of the paper showing through completely. You might think that it looks that way, but it's not. We had that kind of paint flow through. So I'm defining that little corner of the bow down at the bottom, just because I want to give it that right balance between sharp edges and softer edges. Always go careful with the sharp edges, as I said earlier. And I added that little crease in the bow. I'm kind of, looking back and forwards with the reference image, seeing where I need more definition, but not even copying it completely. I'm more using it as an inspiration, let's say, just to check where the shadow areas are, where I need the paint to be more saturated, or where I need it to be more flowy, more watery, more organic. So I actually went in and added that extra ribbon falling down, just to give the painting a little bit more movement. And I'm going in to that shorter ribbon and just kind of outlining the edges of it using the tip of my brush. So when you want more precision, remember to use the tip of your brush when you're using a round brush like I am now. Again, it's a round number 6. And I'm just going in, filling in the bottom of that shorter ribbon and dragging the paint up into the rest of the ribbon. And then, just pulling it, all across the length of that shorter ribbon. And what you do at this point is you just keep looking back towards the reference image and kind of reassessing where you need darker areas to go, where you need lighter areas to go, always remembering to remain soft, to not make it look too stiff. And it's better to leave it looking almost too loose than to make it too stiff, because if you incorporate this into a portrait and it's too stiff, it's going to distract the eye away from the main focus of a portrait. And the main focus of a portrait is rarely going to be a ribbon. It can be, in some cases it can be, if you want it to be. But I would say 99% of cases, the ribbon or scarf or whatever is not going to be the focus point of the focus area of a portrait, or not what you would want that to be. So remember to always keep it loose, to keep it soft, and to keep it natural looking, as I said, almost as if you were painting petals or a flower.
And Fiona, we do have a question. What size paintings do you usually do?
Well, I vary a lot. The smallest is like, I would say, kind of a A5, which I don't know what that is in well, smallest is like A5, which would be like a notebook size, let's say, not a bit larger than a notebook. And then I have one here. The next smallest would be 9 inches by 12 inches. So that's 23 centimeters by 31 centimeters. And then I go up to 10 by 14 or 26 centimeters by 36 centimeters, and then I go quite a bit larger than that. But I don't have anything here handy to remember what that is. Something maybe like 40 centimeters, because here in Italy we use centimeters. But yeah, I can go quite big, but not huge. I wouldn't go gigantic because it's hard to paint, you know, like really, really big in watercolor. You can, but it's hard. So I just went in and added a few extra creases in the center of our bow, giving it a bit more definition.
How dry was it at that point when you put the detail in?
It was much drier than what we started off with because we need more control. So we have less water and more paint at this stage. And as you can see, it's beginning, you know, it's coming across like a bow, but you can tell how you could use this technique for flowers as well, for petals. So I'm just enhancing that shadow at the top of that ribbon that's going down, but underneath the center of the bow. And again, I'm defining that area, that shadow area at the bottom. So I think I only use these two brushes for this painting of the ribbon, and it's in real time, so you can tell how much it took me, kind of around about half an hour. I think the only part that was edited out was I used a heat tool to speed up the drying process, because if you wait for watercolor to dry, I do advise getting, you know, like a small hair dryer or a heat tool to use. It just speeds up the process so much. And I'm kind of, you know, going into any areas that I want to enhance and softening up. This is a stage where you can also soften up any areas that look too harsh to you, just by using a clean, damp brush, making sure it's not dripping wet, but just clean and damp. And you can kind of pull the sharp edges out to make them softer. And that is basically what I keep doing. There, I'm using a clean, damp brush to kind of soften up that edge. I just put down. As you can see, watercolor reactivates, so that's quite easy to do. And I'm doing the same thing on the longer ribbon, just kind of darkening up certain areas, because as I already said, watercolor dries lighter. So certain areas will need darkening up. And again, I'm just kind of pulling that paint into the center of the ribbon. And as you can see, this is actually a process that is really good practice, because it does teach you a lot about water control. And water control is the key to learning watercolor. It's the hardest thing to learn, so you need a lot of practice. And I think painting something like this, which the subject is so basic, so we're not painting a portrait, we're not painting an animal, we're just painting a ribbon, that you have to basically concentrate. It's like the protagonist, the main character of this painting is water control. So that is my bowl completed, and that is how dark my water is. I never changed the water in my jar at the end. I'm just going in kind of to smooth out certain edges. Well, actually, I think I did change my brush here. I just switched up to a larger round silver black velvet. I believe it looks like a number 10, I think.
And Fiona, you dried it before you went over.
I dried it.
To soften it.
I dried it because I didn't want the paint to flow anymore. But with watercolor, even if it's dry, if you go in with a damp brush, you can still reactivate it. So you can see that the edge of that shorter ribbon is kind of blurry. So I went in and redefined it with the tip of my brush. Remember to use the tip of your brush around the corners and any areas where you want precision. Don't go in with the side of your brush. That's something you wouldn't do. So another thing you've always got to be aware of in watercolor is when you're using the tip of your brush, when you're using the side of your brush, and also to always have a fully loaded brush. That means that it's loaded on all sides. So when you're picking up the brush from your palette, from your ceramic palette, your plastic palette, whatever you're using, roll your brush in your mixture. Don't just dab it in there. because you want your brush to be covered on all sides so that when you turn it over, you're getting the same amount of paint on it as you're getting on the other side.
So is it helpful to practice this technique, not only just on one subject like this, but to work on things like petals and other fabrics, just to see how they differ a little bit?
Definitely, absolutely. It's really helpful because I was painting this very, kind of floppy looking bow. But I think if you're painting any other texture, as I was saying earlier, a jacket, for example, a corduroy jacket, you can use the same technique. And then with a very kind of saturated, very not watery mixture, like you have, let's say, 70%, 80% paint and 20% water, you would go in with a small brush and you can add the lines for to create the corduroy effect, let's say, the ridged effect. And that applies to any fabric or texture. But this style could also be used to paint a dress, like a more flowing gown, let's say. It's the same kind of idea. And yeah, to paint petals, to paint flowers, to paint curtains. It's almost just basically at the end, the final touches that make the difference when you go in with a more, with a thicker mixture of paint that will make the difference, because that's when you decide what you're going to create according to what kind of fabric it is. And obviously it's going to be different for stiffer fabrics, or for fabrics that have got stitches showing in them, or fabrics that are more billowy, like curtains, which can be very billowy, so that you probably have more shadow areas and more curves in them than we have in here. But the technique is absolutely the same, basically. So I don't know how long we have left here, Kitty.
Might be a good time to talk about a little bit more about the workshop, about the 90-minute class. The 90-minute class is, well, exactly that. It's 90 minutes of step-by-step instruction from Fiona, where you get to dive a lot deeper into these techniques that she's teaching you today and applying them to a portrait. And that is on May 15th at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time. And if you can't attend live, the recording will be available later as well. And it's also a really wonderful way to support Fiona and her work. So Fiona, why don't you tell us more about what we're actually going to be doing?
Sure. Okay, so the idea came to me because basically when I started my Instagram account, or just a little bit later, I really got inspired. One day I went to an exhibition and I picked up a Frida Kahlo book, like my 10th Frida Kahlo book, because I already have a lot. And I realized that it was her birthday. So it was the 6th of July. So she's a Cancerian like me. So I thought, I really feel like I have to pay a tribute to Frida Kahlo, like on her birthday. And I sat down and I created this painting of Frida Kahlo. But when I was painting, I was listening to a podcast about her life. So I kind of felt really connected with her. And while I was painting, I was listening to the story about her life and her struggles and her suffering. And if you don't know about Frida Kahlo's life, there's a movie with Selma Hayek in it that you can watch it, which it's really amazing. A lot of suffering, because she was involved in a streetcar accident when she was like 18, that left her with lots of injuries. She had to take lots of surgeries in her life, and she started painting lying in bed with a mirror hanging above her bed, and that's how she spent a lot of her time. And she had amazing love stories. She was so ahead of her times, and it gave me an idea to start a whole series about inspirational and influential women who paved the way for the women of today. And so I just started looking up all these influential women, these inspirational women. And the one we will be painting for the mini workshop on May 15th in 90 minutes, step by step, is going to be a small painting of, as I said in the beginning of this live demo, female pilot Amelia Earhart. who at the beginning of last century was the first female pilot and second pilot ever to fly solo, guys, across the Atlantic Ocean. She then flew across the States, she flew across the Pacific, and then ended up disappearing mysteriously while attempting to fly around the world. She was such an amazing and inspirational woman, just like the others. And what's going to be different about this series and this mini workshop is that we're going to connect with the story of this woman while we paint her. So she'll probably be wearing a pilot's scarf. That's why learning how to paint the texture can come in useful with that class. And we will have her in her pilot's attire, so she will be wearing the goggles, and we will be learning how to add symbolisms, learning from their lives. But not only that, in this case, we're not going to have some photo from Pinterest as a reference image. We'll just have to be dependent on some black and white photo that we find in a book, and kind of guess the colors, and you do that through research. Of course, I know that she did have blue-green eyes, kind of reddish strawberry blonde hair. So that is going to be a challenge we're going to tackle, which I think is super interesting. But it would be so interesting if we could create a series where we have all these inspirational women and we talk about them, and then we create these portraits for them, and then you as students learn how to research their lives and add into your portrait symbolisms that are stem from something about their lives that really touched you to the core. So it's something like really different and really exciting. And I just totally love the idea of commemorating these amazing women who paved the way for us through portrait painting. And I will teach you to do that step by step with me if you join these classes. And I think that Kitty can already drop the link for the Amelia Earhart 90-minute workshop in the chat, I believe. So if you want to sign up, do sign up now. If you're listening to this as a recording on YouTube, remember that is available for you to do. And remember that if this is something that you're interested in, of course, the more demand, the more request there is for it, the more of these inspirational women we can do and pay tribute to.
Yes. And I'm going to bring you back, Fiona.
Yeah.
Can you show us again the picture of Amelia Earhart that you did?
So this is a painting of Amelia Earhart. So she has like clouds in her goggles. So that's like a symbolism. And in this case, well, of course, I had more time to paint this one. She has herons, to represent the sky, and more clouds in her chest. And I like adding, splatters of color on the face and making the eyes look very intense, and just how dreamy her gaze looked. And also there's clouds in the background as well. But I mean, every painting can have a different symbolism, okay? So we don't need to all have the same symbols. You can research your own symbols. That's really interesting. So you get your own take on it. You get to pay your own tribute. So this is what we'll be doing. This is not what we can manage to do in 90 minutes. There's probably going to be a smaller portrait, but this is it. It's already got its sketch outline for you to download. If you subscribe to the class, mind you, if you sign up for the class, it's not like I'm going to give those references away just to anyone. If you don't sign up, when you sign up, you get the sketch outline, I believe. Isn't that correct, Kitty?
And I do believe, Fiona, they should sketch ahead of time. Is that correct?
They should sketch ahead of time, because 90 minutes is already quite a short time to have a full portrait. So if they bring the sketch to the class, then they will be prepared to dive right into the painting and to have a little talk also about who Amelia Earhart is, because she's a legend. We've got to connect. Let's connect with the character we're painting. Let's bring things up a notch. Let's make it more passionate, more personal. Let's connect with these figures. I think that is something that is so important in art, and that I'm so excited to be doing with whoever is interested in doing this with me.
Great. And so I want to answer a question that has come up a couple of times in the chat about the masterclass, because I think people are already really excited about that. The link and the sign up for that will be available once the mini workshop happens.
Yeah.
So you can either join that and find the link there, or around the same time, I believe the link is available for the master class anyway. So at that time, everything will be available. But right now, we just have the link for the 90-minute class. And
I believe they usually drop it into the mini when we do the mini workshop. Yes. The master class is made available, but I would suggest that you obviously it is out of my own interest, of course, but I would suggest that you get a warm up painting Amelia Earhart. Yeah. As an inspirational woman, and find out what these women all did. And there's some that are some that I haven't planned. Who knows if we'll be doing them in the future, but you can find them in my Instagram again. But some of them are quite obscure, not very well known. And I used to post about them on a Facebook watercolor group, and people got so passionate about what I'd never heard about this. How is it possible? This amazing woman, in the 19th century, she was some things that seem daring for us today. These women had the bravery, the guts to do it in a time and era when it was considered shocking and appalling for a woman to behave that way. So I just think I'm so excited, you can tell, about paying tribute to these amazing women. And we're starting off with these two. One class, the 90-minute workshop with Amelia Earhart, is going to be shorter, of course, but live, which is interesting. Because you'll be able to interact with me live and ask me live questions and all that, while the masterclass for Frida Kahlo is going to be 3 hours long, and it's going to be a recording.
Great. All right. Well, we do have a question here asking if you find that you have more control with the flat brush or the round brush.
Well, in this instance, painting the river, I found that the sharp edges of the flat brush offered me a lot of help when going into the edges of the bow. And in fact, you can see that I only moved on to the round brush when I was going towards kind of the final stages, and not really kind of trying to define the outer edges of the bow. So it did offer me a lot of control.
Great.
The flat brush did.
All right. Well, we have some comments here saying, love your passion. Thank you for today.
I got carried away.
You're a painter. And it looks wonderful. That painting of Amelia Earhart looks wonderful, just like old-time posters somehow, but with a modern touch. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming up, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up. So everybody, we do these free live demos several times a week, so please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date and be alerted to when we go live. And we also have our Make More Art podcast, which is interviews with some of our artists, which is a fun thing to listen to while you're painting. You'll get some inspiration from that. And really, Fiona, this was really wonderful. It's really exciting to hear about your passion for the subjects that you're painting and how much of a connection that you have with them. And yeah, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. And until we see you next time, make more art. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.